All right, so in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to add a method inside our main activity class, which will allow us to bind the button that we added for the contact to the code. Okay, so what you guys should be doing is adding the other fields for the rest of the contact information. So you had to do like 2 other ones there. So we're gonna bind that contact so that then you can add that to the database. And so what we want to do inside our main activity is create a public void method, and we're going to call it add data. And we're going to do add data, and we're going to have for our parameter list this thing called a view. This is what we use to bind our buttons or whatever our fields are in the layout to our code. Okay, so I'm going to put that in there. And the first thing I want to do is, as I've always done, is put a log message in here that we are dumping something to our consoles to see where we're at. And in this case, we are going to say that we have, we're going to say add contact button pressed, something like that. Okay, so this is what will happen when, and I'll show you just how we're going to bind it in just a second. This is the method that will be called when we push that button. Okay, so we want to see that that has happened. And then what I want to do is create a Boolean variable called is inserted. And I want to set that equal to my database and dot insert data. This is the insert data that we created from the database helper. This was the last one we did. So we want to call that method, and we want to pass to it our what's called edit name dot get text, and then dot toString. Okay, and I'll explain what we're doing here in just a second. And I think that's all we need there. All right, so this is going to be not resolved yet, so we're going to add that in just a second. But this is where we're going to call that insert data, and remember it passed back a Boolean, so then we're going to check to see if this thing has worked. So if is inserted is true, then what we want to do is we want to create what's called a toast message up to the screen. Okay, toast messages, we'll look at the API in class. We want to, this puts a little bit of information up to the screen that allows us to then see something happen without necessarily a log D message, because log Ds require that we are bound or tethered to a computer. With the toast messages, we can print stuff out on the actual screen based on like some debug activity. So in this case, I want to send this context, or it might be this or main activity dot this. I guess to be proper, we can just say main activity dot this. So it's going to be our context here, and then the text that we want to put in here is some kind of message, success, that the contact is inserted, something like that. Success there. And then you can either have a long or a short toast message, and then we say we're going to show it. So this basically says post this little temporary message up to the screen that will say success contact inserted, and then it will disappear after some amount of time. Okay, so we do that, and I think, do I have a missing parentheses here? Oh, no. So we do toast.make text with the stuff, and then we say dot show, which will show it up on the screen. All right, so that's all we want to do there, and then we have an else condition, and again, we'll put the toast message in here that says we failed. So we say, instead of success, we say failed, contact not inserted. And we have that one shine up. Okay, so we should be able to see that happen when we press the button. Okay, what we need here though is to define what this edit name thing is. Okay, so if we go up to the top, this is going to be of type edit text. This is what we added when we put it into our main activity screen. That was the edit text field, and if you remember, let's see if it was here, we called it edit text name, right? Okay, so it's of type edit text, and then I want to call it edit name, and because that's what we call it down here. Okay, we will bind that to it in just a second, to the actual ID of it, and I will show you how to do that in just a second. Okay, but here is our edit name. It's the text. We're going to get the text in string format. We're going to insert it into the database. You guys will add more fields to that for the other additional fields of the phone number and the address, for example, and then we're going to add that data. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to bind to this add data method when we actually press the button to add the contact. So I'm going to go into the activity main XML, and I'm going to double click on my add contact, and in here we can bind it. And so what we want to bind it is we have to find the field called onClick. So when we click this thing, or when we tap it, we want it to call a method, and the method that we have available is this one called add data. So we are in the main activities screen, right? So any method that I put together inside there will be available for me to call when we click it or when we tap it. Okay, so it's there now, and now we have it bound. All right, so based on that, then we should be able to run and see that we are using our layout from the activity main, the XML file. When we insert the data, we are going to get our edit name, and we will then be able to grab that. And I think what we need to do though is make this thing edit name. So let me check on that. Okay, so yeah, what I was just saying, that we need to bind this edit text.name ID in our code, and we haven't done yet. So we need to do that before we can actually run it. We go into our main activity, and okay, so we go into our main activity, and we have our edit text declared here. Inside our onCreate, though, we need to bind that to the layout. Okay, so underneath our set content view, we're going to say edit name, and that's going to be, let's see, edit name, and that's going to be equal to, we use a method called find view by ID, and so this is going to bind it to the ID that we have in the XML file. Okay, so we want to call this R, this is our resource, and it's an ID, the resource ID, and then we want to do, we want to call it edit text underscore name. This is the name we gave it in our layout, right? So this is here, edit text name. So whatever you give it in here, this is what we're calling it, and we're binding the view by ID. So our ID was this edit text name, and it's the resource ID in our find by view method, and we're going to bind that to this edit name field here, which is an edit text. Okay, so that binds these fields all together, and then we bound our button to our add data by going into our XML file, and we are binding it by using the onClick field inside our attribute for that. Okay, so now that we have that, now we can run it, and we should be able to run on the machine, on the device, and you should be able to put a name in and see it get added to the database. All right, so then if we look at our screen, we should have our name, and we should be able to edit that by just typing in some name, and then we can add add the context. So we can press that and it should add it in. Okay, so I'll demonstrate this more in class.